Welcome again to Frontlines. We have been silent on Frontlines for 77 days. Garo and I, like many of you, have each been active working with friends. Welcome again to Frontlines. We have been silent on Frontlines for 77 days. Garo and I, like many of you, have each been active. Apologize for that. Garo and I, like many of you, have been active working with friends in Artsakh and Armenia, doing what we can to help rebuild sovereignty and security, strengthen civil society, and bring hope to our people. The last couple of days, however, was another blunt blow in the gut. Like many of you, throughout our lives, and especially during and after the war, we have contributed time and resources to many organizations, initiatives, programs, and projects, each one doing something important in the homeland for our people. Some of those organizations are traditional institutions that have been working in Armenia and Artsakh for over 30 years, some in the diaspora for a century and even more. Some are new ones, having sprung up during and in the aftermath of the war. There are many doing real work in any and every capacity to make a difference on the ground in the lives and places that are in existential risk. But today we learned again that this is really never enough. It will never be enough. There is something fundamentally missing, something which for decades we assumed we should have had in common. It is clear, as I'm sure it has been clear to many of you, that we really are not all on the same page. Peace at any cost, say some, peace only through strength, say others. But these choices are really not made in a vacuum. They are made in front of an emboldened demagogue intent on using force over and over and over again. Then there are those difficult pressure points for the Armenian nation. Turks apparently insulting every Armenian globally by flashing the sign of the gray wolves at a genocide memorial in the heart of Yerevan, and there's no consequence. Azerbaijan is destroying centuries-old Armenian heritage, and again, there's no real, actual consequence. Azerbaijan holds our POWs and then actually trades them human lives for territory and other concessions, and we feel that there is no real, actual consequence. These actions, of course, in violation of the Geneva Convention. They influence European power brokers while more than 5,000 families still mourn the loss of a son, a father, a brother. And it makes one think, what are we doing? We've asked that question. What should we be doing? We've asked that question as well. What binds us together, perhaps, is the more important question to ask. And I find that the foundation of a state, a nation state, requires some common shared purpose. We should be able to agree on one thing at least, and that is our national dignity. Dignity is the foundation of the state. Everything that flows from it only strengthens the state. Everything that insults it only further compromises the state. The fundamental principle, I believe, is really that simple. A state is not founded on economic growth or anti-corruption legislation, on incessant political infighting. It is not even founded on military prowess. It's founded on one thing alone: national dignity. From national dignity flows all the rest: a military to protect it, an economy to help it flourish, an education system to celebrate and instill it, and cultural institutions to appreciate, protect, and preserve it. If we could just agree that national dignity matters first, we would know what can and cannot be done in the name of this nation. We would know where the red lines must be in order to maintain a nation, to remain a nation state, and to remain that force which can serve and protect a future worth living. If we have nothing else in this vituperative atmosphere to find common ground in, perhaps this is our common guidepost. And I would have hoped that our national dignity could be the source of that common bond. And with that, I'd like to pass it off to my friend and colleague to introduce our first guest for now our third season of Frontline.
Thank you, Karnig. Parior Artsakh-siner, Parior Hayastan-siner, Parior Spurka Hayer. Good day, to everyone in Artsakh, good day to everyone in Armenia, and good day and good evening to everyone in the diaspora. It's true, we have been off the air for 77 days. We have not been sleeping during those 77 days. During that time, both Karnig and I have visited Artsakh and Armenia, and we have been engaged on a daily basis, as many of you have as well. And none has been more engaged with all things Artsakh, Armenia, and Armenian nation than our guest and our dear friend, the former human rights defender for the Republic of Armenia, Arman Tatoyan. Arman, pari egazis.
Thank you, Karnig Jan, Garo Jan. I'm very glad to be your guest again, and I'm very glad that you are resuming another session or season of the front lines, which has been serving as an important platform of not only for providing information to our compatriots, but for deep and thorough analysis of the situation and proposing and making practical recommendations and proposals towards solution of the problems. Well, as all of us could see, Azerbaijani authorities are demanding, in violation of the trilateral ceasefire agreement of November 9, 2020, blatant violation, to close the corridor, so-called Lachin corridor, that connects Armenia with Artsakh. And apart from this, and for this purpose, they are using force apparently, and unfortunately we have killed soldiers of the Artsakh Defense Army and wounded soldiers, almost 20 soldiers according to official data information. This is a clear violation. These activities, these actions are clear violations of the trilateral statements, because the statement continues clear clause providing that providing as follows: that the parties agreed that the plan for the construction of a new road along the Lachin corridor shall be determined within the next 3 years, providing communication between Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia, with the subsequent redeployment of Russian peacekeeping troops to protect this route. So I have to say that first of all, we have in mind that that Artsakh has, or the so-called territorial integrity of Azerbaijan has no relation with Artsakh. This is very clear. But when we go to the formal part of this issue and try to stick to this formal and the current situation, it is very apparent that this military aggression is a part of Azerbaijani policy of Armenophobia, hatred, and the clear part of the clear genocidal policy. Because Azerbaijan, after the war, has been very clearly expressing its policy of isolating Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, and very clear policy of ethnic cleansings. And we had already these cases when they blocked gas supply, they hindered it, they were not allowing, and even in winter, Artsakh stayed without gas supply, which was clear, I would say, clear part of the Azerbaijani single policy of Armenophobia and of this genocidal policy. We had the case of occupation of Parukh village and some other cases. And unfortunately, Azerbaijani authorities continue this policy. And yesterday's aggression and before that is a clear continuation and a clear, it testifies very clearly of these policies of Azerbaijani authorities and their intentions, because the intentions are there and they're very clear. We should not forget words of the president of Azerbaijan, who very clearly announced that their strategic and their political purposes are even far more, including Tunik and Kerkonian. And Artsakh is apparently, or having Artsakh as a part of Azerbaijan without status, without Armenians, is the ultimate goal of this authorities.
Arman, if I may follow up real quickly. You mentioned the policy of isolation. I think that it'd be worthwhile, especially in light of the things that have transpired over the last 24 to 48 hours, to dig into that a little bit more. You mentioned gas supplies and other utility services, but there's also, I guess, the geographical isolation that is really posing a real existential risk. And if you could talk a little bit about over the last 24 to 48 hours, the nature of the attacks, where they came from, and a little bit about the physical isolation that is that the risk that's posed by the physical isolation to the population of Artsakh right now.
Well, Azerbaijan has been always trying to isolate Artsakh from the outside world. It was very, very clear, and they have been implementing this policy at the international level, at all levels, I would say. But now, yes, you are right. If we talk about the physical, about the isolation now, it is also physical isolation, because the only route that connects Armenia and Artsakh, and generally Artsakh with the outside world through Armenia, is the corridor that exists now and connects so-called Lachin corridor through Berzor, which connects Armenia and Artsakh with the outside world, let's say, through Armenia. Azerbaijani attacks are directed apparently against this, towards this this corridor and this route, let's say, this way that is a life way, let's say, and their purpose is very clear, to physically isolate Artsakh in this sense as well, because the new route even is not agreed, and apparently it is very clear that the current military attacks are directed towards this, exactly towards this corridor, and the purpose is to close the corridor. And apparently, so that is why the purpose is to isolate and to cut, let's say, this this possibility of this life route, let's say, and to leave our compatriots without any possibility with the outside world. And there is another aspect of isolation, of course, which they continue in parallel with the physical isolation. This is the isolation from the outside, from international worldwide community, which they have been doing for so many years. And after the ceasefire agreement, they continue it with more intensively, even trying to present to the world as if they are supporters of peace and they want peace, but because of Armenians of Artsakh and because of Armenia, it is not possible to reach. Apparently, this is an open lie, and behind these actions we have clear policy. Again, we have to come back to their policy of Armenophobia and the hatred and genocidal policies. And I think that their attempts to close the corridor and to cut any possibility of Artsakh to have connection with the outside world is a part of their policy.
You know, I want to ask a question that probably is a byproduct of my ignorance as it comes to international law. Here's what I do not understand. There was an agreement on November 9, November 10, 2020, and as Arman alluded to it, that it would be within the next 3 years following November of 2020 that the construction of a new route via the Lachin corridor would provide a connection between Artsakh and Armenia, and the Russian peacekeeping forces will be then subsequently relocated to protect that route. So when we have Azerbaijan now demanding the closure of the corridor, the current corridor, a clear violation of the November 2020 agreement, the lawyer in me just says, wait a minute, so there was an agreement and here's a clear breach of the agreement. So as an international lawyer, Karnig, and Arman, as one who is very well versed in international legal principles, what is the remedy? Is the remedy to what? To go back to ICJ? Is the remedy to then say to the world powers, look, this country clearly, even when they enter into an agreement, and a consideration for that agreement, one would say, is giving up the Karabakh region and giving up all sorts of concessions. Now they don't get the benefit of that agreement, and less than 2 years after the so-called ceasefire, the so-called statement, they're being told, close the corridor now. And they're being made to suffer forceful incursions and attacks onto regions that are populated by civilians. What is the remedy? Is there a remedy or is there no remedy? And if there's no remedy, then what's the value of having entered into the agreement in the first place?
Yeah, perhaps I can jump in there first, Arman, if you don't mind. I think, I think we're clearly beyond the period of kind of legalistic solutions to the current crisis. I think that there's no question in terms of the interpretation, their interpretation of the treaty is of the trilateral statement. The way they're interpreting it right now to serve their military purposes is opportunistic. If I'm not mistaken, Arman, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Russian Foreign Ministry recently issued a statement saying that Azerbaijan's conduct violates the spirit and letter of the trilateral agreement, which of course Russia brokered. So I think that I think that at this stage, I think that kind of considering legalistic remedies and solutions is really perhaps not the real core, because it seems as if the interpretation of the agreement is clearly and openly wrong, but it's being used to advance a military objective. And I think that to kind of shift it over to Arman to kind of address this point, at what stage, Arman, I guess the kind of the broader question is, despite the flagrant violations, which now even the party that brokered the trilateral statement indicates that Azerbaijan's position is a violation, despite these blatant violations, is Russia really sitting at the middle of this? And is Russia going to be the actual arbiter of decision maker as to what is happening currently with respect to the Lachin corridor? Or are we going to see, perhaps broader involvement by other forces? Or are we just going to see this push and pull until there's a final resolution of whatever that means? What do you see?
Well, I agree with you that this legal issues or the legalistic view is not the core in this, unfortunate in this context. And because let me just respond to what Garo said. Well, unfortunately, Azerbaijan clearly violates all the international regulations that exist and or are issued or have been issued very recently by international instances such as International Court of Justice, their provisional measures. Apparently, they continue spreading hatred at the state level. They continue the policy of generating animosity between the nations, and they keep this atmosphere of animosity in their own society. And apparently, through this military aggression and military attacks, we have clear violation of human rights, even useless to speak about this. This is right to life, right to live peacefully in their motherland, and many other rights. What I can say that well, apparently this is as was mentioned at the state level by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and also there were statements coming from Artsakh that this was the exactly area under the responsibility of Russian peacekeepers So apparently they have I think to fulfill their mandate. But the problem here is also that the mandate of the peacekeepers is not clear, and which I think creates is also very problematic. And also it does not contribute, let's say, to peace or keeping the proper peace, let's say. And apart from this, Azerbaijan has been always trying to undermine the mandate of the Russian peacekeepers. That is why I think that currently, especially their mandate and their role is very, very important, because as we can see that this fragile situation is always being attacked by Azerbaijan, and very heavily. And Azerbaijan has not abandoned their policies of eliminating or let's say destroying Artsakh and Armenians through their ethnic cleansing policies.
You know, can I just ask just a quick question? You know, it's one thing I think that has popped up. I think those of us that have been following the events of the last 24 to 48 hours in particular have noticed the recent statements coming out from international institutions, where again, they're not laying the blame on any party, but saying that the hostilities should cease, or there should be a de-escalation of the events that are taking place. We see this coming out from European institutions. The Russian Federation, in contrast, has directly laid the blame on Azerbaijan, saying that it violated the ceasefire twice.
Monday and
exactly.
Again today.
What is it in your experience with international institutions, Arman, especially in Europe, that are dealing with this issue in particular, particularly in the area of human rights? What is it that is going to be able to push them over the line of finding false parity to the point where they can actually say that one of the parties has violated the ceasefire? What is it going to take?
Well, this is the main issue. Unfortunately, this has been always the case, that international institutions are trying to put the responsibility on both parties, let's say, or all parties. And their calls usually are directed to both Armenia, Azerbaijan, and to some extent also Artsakh. One can have an impression that Armenia or Artsakh are also interested in escalation of the conflict, and they also cause this, let's say, or they also conduct military attacks. But of course, the reality is everything is different, and this has been always the Azerbaijani part and the authorities that were creating and targeting not only Armenia but Artsakh. And the recent attacks, the recent military attacks and military aggression is a clear example of this. Unfortunately, Azerbaijani authorities and Azerbaijan in general, they continue spreading the misinformation about the current situation. That is why we have to provide proper information, and we have to be very quick, very fast in providing proper information to the international community to present a clear situation. And my experience shows that it is also very important always to work very properly with the facts and to present clear facts to the international community and to give them the ground, not to allow, let's say, Azerbaijani authorities to mislead these international institutions. I'm referring now to, I don't know, OSCE, to EU, to Council of Europe, other international instances and organizations. That is, and this has been always the policy from the Azerbaijani part. And I think that now, especially, we have to be careful with this. And we have, I think, all of us, not only in Armenia, of course, not only in Artsakh, but also diaspora, to do everything to provide the clear and the right information and the facts to the international community.
We keep talking about the facts, and here's a fact that comes to mind. It's an eerie fact. We all talk about the 44-day war, September 27 through November of 2020. But let's remember that before the September 27 onslaught, there was a test by Azerbaijan, an incursion and an attack, much like the ones that have taken place the last couple of days, in August of 2020. And in August of 2020, it seems to me Azerbaijan tested the waters to see if there was going to be a backlash internationally, and seeing no appreciable backlash, they had the green light to carry on and implement what they had planned, beginning with September 27. I'm concerned that these incursions the last couple of days and these demands and these hostile actions may be a prelude to yet another September, this time 2 years after 2020. So to the extent that these incursions are occurring, and we Armenians seem to be of late very busy pointing fingers at one another, criticizing each other, talking about all of us talking but not doing anything. I'm curious, at what point will each and every one of us understand that 24/7 we need to be knocking on doors and we need to be speaking in people's faces about what's going on, because if we do not get any reaction, at least beginning internally with us Armenian communities of the diaspora, the Armenians of Armenia, we should not expect the world community to react. We should start by being alert to what's going on. It's great to have fun in Yerevan, but the regions that I've visited, the regions that Karnig has visited, the regions that you have visited, Arman, tell a different story. What can we do to change this let somebody else do it mindset, if you will?
Well, this is a very important question, and Garojan, I think, well, first of all, what is very important, we have to show to the outside world, to the worldwide community, what is happening on the ground. And yes, we are talking about facts, which is very important, but we also, I think, we have to use these facts to not just, an end in itself, but we have to use them for the international community, and we have to use international instruments, because for states like Armenia, for the Artsakh issue, it is very important. It is crucial to use, I think, international instruments, including not only, I'm referring to UN, to others, but to also OSCE and to other instruments. The thing is that there are, unfortunately, Azerbaijan shows that they are not willing to follow the rules, and the 2020 or their activities and their behavior after 2020 agreement is very aggressive, and it does not show any signs of their intention, of regulating these issues through peace or respecting dignity and the rights of the people of Artsakh. Of course not, and also Armenians, and it will not be, because they have a very deep policy, as I was referring to, with a different purpose. And even when some years ago, when still before the war, the situation was different, again, they were openly showing that their purpose is different. And currently, especially after the war, they are more intensively and more aggressively showing to the world, or let's say at least we have to show to the world that their purpose is much more aggressive, and Azerbaijani authorities did not abandon even a single part of their intentions and the policies.
We got an interesting comment from Bedros Sanikian, and I think it's probably worth addressing because it has been in the news lately. that the question essentially asks that, to get the world to react, we were unable to get the world to react positively during the favorably to us during the 44-day war, that they will not react now because of Azerbaijan and Europe's recent signing of the gas pipeline deal, given the war in Ukraine. Is there room in this type of difficult geopolitical climate? Is there room for human rights-based approaches to make change or to change the mindset of actors in Europe or other global actors that are involved in the region?
Well, Karnig, there are clear international rules providing that, there is even very important UN slogan, no one should be left behind, no human right ignored. And there is a very famous human rights diplomacy, which clearly specifies that the fact that any territory is not recognized, or the fact that Artsakh is not recognized state, it does not mean that the human rights cannot be protected. And I have to say that human rights diplomacy and human rights concepts, they will contribute, and they have to contribute to the solution, overall solution of the Artsakh issue. Because currently we are speaking about human rights, about right to life. This is an existential issue, right? And we clearly see that Azerbaijani authorities, their intentions are targeted against even the highest values. This is right to life, dignity, and other rights. And apparently, it is very clear that Azerbaijani authorities, it is not possible by nature to secure or to have security and rights protected of our compatriots in any form of any status, but inside Azerbaijan. Of course not. And that is why, and they are not even, it is not possible even to speak about other rights, such as social rights, even economic rights, because their current policies clearly provide this. If they cannot provide protection of right to life, the existential issue, it is senseless of speaking about other rights. And this is very clear. That is why we are saying that it is not possible, by nature, not possible objectively, to provide or to secure any protection of any rights of our compatriots inside or in current situation or inside Azerbaijan. Of course not possible. That is why this is the only way that all these concepts and the policies, and I'm not even talking about, let's say, political legal concepts, such as the very important concept that Azerbaijani territorial integrity of Azerbaijan has no relation with Artsakh. And I think that we have to combine these two very important, at least, concepts in this situation. Well, Artsakh issue, if we try to look at Artsakh issue and the Nagorno-Karabakh issue, let's say generally broader, we have different angles. The issue related to the status, to the rights, humanitarian issues, and many other issues. So, but human rights aspects are very important. It's very important, and I think these are one of the cores that we need to use, while protecting rights of our compatriots and raising up to the international community these problems.
Let me just say this. Yes, during the 44-day war, we failed, clearly, we Armenians, both from Yerevan to the diaspora, we failed to bring the necessary reaction, the appropriate response to the aggression of Azerbaijan, to the aggression of Turkey, to the aggression of the hired mercenaries that came onto Artsakh and wreaked havoc. But that's not to say that from that failure, we should not have learned lessons to double and triple our efforts and to continue to bring attention, both diplomatically from Yerevan and diplomatically through our various Armenian lobby groups around the globe. Because what is our alternative? Is our alternative to then welcome a new armed conflict with 100 million on one side and 10 million on the other, 8 million of which are outside of Armenia and Artsakh? I don't understand when critics criticize the current government. I among them, but I among them, don't seem to have the solutions. I struggle every day and every night to find the solutions. I don't know what the solution is. The only solution that I have landed on is to be engaged, to assist as much as possible to those on the ground, and to raise my voice to those who are in positions of power, from my representatives to others who are power brokers, if you will. I don't know what the solution is other than to knock on that door until somebody answers the door, but at the same time, to not hope that someone's going to come to my rescue and just sit there and wait instead of trying to do something. Each and every one of us Armenians trying to do something, anything, to change the current status quo, whatever that may be. Providing economic aid to those on the ground, providing moral support, or providing our voice in places where their voices from the ground cannot reach and be heard. I don't know, folks. There were comments when we posted our announcement for our this evening's and this morning in Yerevan's front lines. And I hope that those who commented, rather than criticizing, rather than being sarcastic, offer solutions, offer their respective solutions. We are so good at criticizing one another. We each think we know it all. Well, tell us all, and maybe we will learn from one another. There's not a question there anywhere. It's just
I know, but I think those are important thoughts, Garo, and I think that it kind of underlines one of the questions that I had for Arman. Clearly, there's a lot of political infighting. There are differences across the board in the political spectrum, whether it's in Armenia and the diaspora or Armenia and the diaspora in Artsakh. It is a moment of real disunity. I think that if I can just ask you to step back from kind of the human rights approach just for a second and address something a little bit, perhaps a little bit more fundamental, and that is, you're unique in that you've had your experience not only in Armenia within government and in a quasi-governmental position as ombudsman, but also with your experience in terms of supporting the Artsakh ombudsman throughout the war and the earlier phases, as well as being an active participant in diasporan activities. What is it that you feel should be some of the core pillars of our national unified purpose? What are people speak about all our differences on political positions, on even things that we didn't even realize, quite frankly, that there were differences on. But what are the points in this existential moment that you feel are the unifying forces, or should be the unifying forces for our nation globally?
Well, Karnig Jan and Garo also referred rightly to this very important fundamental issue. We have to realize that there are existential issues and threats to us all, to the whole nation, I have to say. And currently, unfortunately, the geopolitical situation, the situation after the war, intensifies or creates more problems to this issue and to the current situation. We have to stand over any political interest. Yeah, we are different, yes, and we can criticize one another, and we do so. And to some extent, it is normal because we have to have different views. But when it comes to issues like this, existential issues, because Artsakh is apparently an existential issue, not only for Armenians of Artsakh, but for all of us. I think for all Armenians, for not only Armenians living in Armenia, but also diaspora, not only for citizens who live in Armenia, but apparently and especially Artsakh. That is why we have here, we need solidarity, and we need here to be united towards this single purpose, which is very important. It is very clear that Azerbaijani authorities, they use the fact that unfortunately our society now is divided. Unfortunately, we have division in diaspora, and it is very, very, let's say, I would say, very openly is used by the authorities of Azerbaijan, not only Azerbaijan, but also Turkey. And this is, they try to make this one of our weak points. And that is why we have to think, I think, wide, and in this sense, unfortunately, this division here only creates problems. And we have also to have in mind that, you know, when we go to Shushi, when we go to Artsakh, unfortunately, we can see it from far, but we have no access at the moment, at least because of the Azerbaijani occupation. We have to think about this, that our activities and our role and our missions should be united, and so that we can keep our motherland, our sacred motherland. And you know, I think these moments are the right moments that should bring us together in this sense. Unfortunately, we can see that in social media, apart from, in parallel with these tensions, there is also intolerance. We not only criticize each other, but we are too intolerant. And these existential threats, I think, must bring us together in this. I'm speaking from that specific angle, and to work towards this very important purpose of strengthening ourselves, of becoming strong and powerful to overcome these challenges.
Well, you know, Arman Tatoyan, who's a dear friend of mine, just commented that we are limping. I think we're beyond limping. I think we're crawling as a nation. But you know, I harken back, or I just get fixated on the fact that, you know, yes, as Salpi and other viewers said, the government has failed. Okay, the government has failed. I'm not going to say the government has succeeded. How could any government be considered a success, you know, when we have what we have? But I want to hear what is the alternative. I want to hear and see and understand an alternative path. My call to everyone is to think along those lines instead of saying, you failed. Okay, what's the solution? What's the alternative? And what's the alternative path? There must be one. And until we can figure out what that is, at a minimum, shouldn't we at least agree to disagree and find points upon which we agree, such as the existential threat that has been there now for almost 2 years. For almost 2 years. And what are we doing? We're talking about the mistake of the foreign ministry, the dismal remark or the choices made by a prime minister. These politicians are here today and gone tomorrow, just like those who preceded them and the ones that will follow them. But we as a nation, what are we doing to strengthen the nation? What are we doing to provide positive alternatives as opposed to criticism? Here's a thought. Let everybody put down on the comment section of this evening's and this morning's broadcast an idea, a thought, an alternative to the current status quo. I welcome it. I think Karnig will as well, and I think those who follow us and are with us will also welcome it. Let's start a dialogue about what can we do together.
I think that, if I can just comment on that, Garo, I think that I think what's frustrating many people is that there's a state element to this, right? That there's a lot of functions that are done at the state level, and there's a lot of information in terms of details that inform those decisions. I do know that there is one area that we and it's always like this, I feel, that it's the most vulnerable of us that can benefit the most from assistance in every capacity. And right now, I really do feel that that's the people of Artsakh right now. There are a lot of government decisions that we don't have access to the information that feeds that decision making, not to justify it or not justify it, but how can we be the most effective? Arman spoke just a moment ago of the fact that the isolation aspect. I think the diaspora has been very important in trying to minimize the impact of the Azerbaijani policy of isolation with respect to Artsakh. I believe that that's an area where direct individual and there are many individuals and there are many groups doing this, but I think we could redouble our efforts at this phase, particularly given the uncertainty that surrounds Artsakh. And I'd like to get Arman's thoughts of the needs, the population needs, in your discussions with the Human Rights Ombudsman Arman Tatoyan, as well as others in Artsakh. What are the areas you feel are most vulnerable within Artsakh society, aside from the physical security, which is obviously that's what brought us to start our third season early, is the fact of physical security. But we know that there's a lot more that needs to be done today in Artsakh. How are those bridges built, Arman? How do you build those types of bridges between Armenia and Artsakh individuals and groups and diaspora in Artsakh, especially now in this digital age?
Karnig, this is a very important question, but let me for a moment go back to what Garo said related to, there was a very important, let's say, idea about one has the impression that we do not do our homework properly at the national level, which is very important. We may blame some parties, states, geopolitical, forces, power that they do not support us, they do not assist us. But I think another important thing is whether we do our homework properly. When I'm saying our homework, I mean specifically how proper we are in collecting facts, in presenting to the international instances, in formulating our demands, our requirements, and whether we ourselves, we hinder this nationwide, let's say, purposes. And yesterday in my statement, I mentioned very clearly that unfortunately from Armenia, we have officials who create let's say, or who are creating even grounds for Azerbaijan to use them against Armenia, even when they are, through their statements, when they justify presence of Azerbaijani authorities, when for some political purposes, they try to hide violations of Azerbaijani armed forces. All of these facts, all of these things are very important because later, during these escalations, Azerbaijani authorities are clearly using them, and they are advocating, let's say, before international instances, trying to present themselves as those who are trying to build peace, but Armenia is hindering peace in the region. So now coming back to what you said just, it is very important now, and I was very recently in Artsakh. We had meetings, and I was in Artsakh several months ago. Before that, after the war already several times. Most important thing now is not to allow our compatriots in Artsakh to feel that they are isolated and they are alone, because this war, unfortunately, contributed largely to this, serves to this purpose, let's say, which is very much being carried out by Azerbaijan, and this is their ultimate purpose. That is why we have to do everything not to allow this happen. Yes, the physical accessibility, physical access to Artsakh is limited, is different, and then we had before unlimited access. So it's different, it's complicated, but we have other means, such as, though I have to say that physical visits are very important. When we physically visit Artsakh, these visits are very important ways to show to the world that Artsakh continues to live, and then we are supporting Artsakh, because Azerbaijani authorities are apparently clearly isolating Artsakh. They continue it more aggressively now, and our visits to Artsakh, presenting it to the world, the situation is, is a very important way that we have to use to fight against these isolation policies of Azerbaijan, because then later they use this for their genocidal purposes. Apart from this, I think there should be many other ways of connecting Artsakh with the world, with our diaspora, with Armenia. There can be other many different projects, such as connecting youth, let's say, for example, with outside world, connecting the life of Artsakh. We're trying to present to the world that Artsakh is not just a part where military actions always take place, but this is a place where people live. People think about their destinies, and people think about their lives, and they know that Armenians in the world are by their side, which is very important. And that is why currently this, let's say, processes, these developments are more than important. And I think these are the ways, one of the ways that lead to the protection of our compatriots in Artsakh, and largely contribute, of course, solution of the Artsakh issue.
We're coming up on an hour, Karnig. I just want to caution you. I know Arman had another commitment to go to shortly. I have nothing to add to this discussion, because this discussion was initially intended to just reach out to everyone who seems to be concerned, who posts on social media, but social media posts are not going to save the day. There needs to be engagement on an individual, on a communal, and on a national level, all of it leading to an international reaction that we hope for, but hope cannot spring eternal on its own. It requires work to realize that hope and have it become a reality. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Well, I think that given the viewership, given the fact that we draw an audience from across the world, I feel as if, Arman, you've become a familiar face for Armenians in the global nation, as we like to call it, and we appreciate very much your time for coming and joining with us today to discuss the last 24 to 48 hours, the implications and possible approaches. I wanted to ask just kind of a closing question to you, if I may, Arman, just in your experience in dealing with these types of incidents along the borders in Artsakh and of course in Armenia during the war and in the aftermath. Is it fair to say that our vigilance must continue because this is not the end? This is not, these aren't isolated incidents, that these are all part and parcel of a long-term plan that Azerbaijan continues to implement. I wanted to get your thoughts on these types of incidents, how they're connected, and why the Armenians across the world should remain interested and remain vigilant about what is happening in the homeland.
Karnig Can, we have to continue, we have to keep our vigilance, and we have to be vigilant because, yes, this is not a single case, these are not single incidents, but these are parts of systemic single policy of the Azerbaijani authorities. They have been developing these policies for years, for decades, and spreading hatred in their nation towards Armenians, and now generations are raised. So that is why, and they do continue these policies. They are continuing these policies not only against Artsakh, especially, of course, their main target is Artsakh, but also Armenia. Not only Armenia and Artsakh, but also Armenians in the diaspora who live in other countries, because their policy of Armenophobia, this hatred policy, keeps the atmosphere of animosity between the two nations in the world, and that is why it is very, very dangerous. When during my meetings with international community in other countries, I've been always trying also to show to them that these policies are also dangerous for their countries, because if they want Azerbaijani authorities, they may very easily create tensions, attacks, human rights violations, or play with the stability and legal systems of these countries. And we could see this very clearly. If you remember my visit to the United States of America, together with Garo, we went to San Francisco, and we could observe ourselves how Armenian church was set on fire. Then the school became under attack by Azerbaijani, some Azerbaijanis paramilitary, let's say, groups, even terroristic. And what is this? This is a direct consequence, and with a direct link to the Azerbaijani policy of Armenophobia and these genocidal policies. That is why we have to be very vigilant, not only in Armenia and Artsakh, but also in the world. And I'm referring now to all Armenians, because this has become a pan-Armenian issue, and an issue that concerns the whole nation. And there are no, and apparently these incidents, I see clear danger for these incidents, not only for Artsakh, but also for Armenia, especially after the war. You know that Azerbaijani authorities are illegally located in the vicinity, direct vicinity of villages and communities of Armenia as well. They are on the roads connecting communities connecting communities of Armenia. So that is why we have to be very, very careful, and we have always to stick to this very important issue, and to continue in this, this logic, and in this sense, presenting to the world the reality, but not also knowing ourselves what is the reality, and that all of these things are parts of these policies. And by the way, what was happening yesterday was clearly, I was remembering the effects of the Turkish policy that they carried out 100 years ago with our compatriots. So the same is happening now. That is why the intention is the same, and we have to have in our mind these very important, I think, principles.
And I think that one of our previous guests, Arman Tatoyan, posted recently some images from Azerbaijani forces, where they harken back to Enver Pasha even, and glorify his acts in their current missions. And so clearly the line is deep, the line is strong, the continuum is real, and it's happening in front of our eyes. And I think that Arman's call to remain vigilant across the Armenian nation is extremely important. And thank you again, Arman. And with that, I'll pass it over to Garo for his final word, final thoughts.
Thank you, Karnig. I want to thank Arman for continuing to be engaged, as we know, Karnig and I know very well, on a daily basis, despite the fact that his mandate as the human rights defender of the Republic of Armenia ended in February of this year. Arman Tatoyan has continued to be engaged on a daily and hourly basis. This we know of personally, up close and personal, Karnig and I thank you for that, Arman. And speaking of Arman's engagement, Arman's statement less than 24 hours ago had an excerpt that really resonated with me, and the English translation loosely is, I continue to insist that we must not allow ourselves to be lulled into fake peace loving. Yes, peace is the highest value. We all want peace, but peace does not happen only at the expense of our motherland and our existence, and by continuous violation of our rights and dignity. Arman, you put it very well. I cannot agree with you more. And to that, I say, in order for us to strive for peace, not at the expense of our rights and dignity, not at the expense of our motherland and our existence, we must take action, and we must take action now. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by we must take action? Well, for starters, as we've spoken moments ago, we need to stay connected with Artsakh, whether it is physically, personally being able to and actually accomplishing a personal visit to Artsakh, and if not, then connecting with Artsakh via Zoom, by telephone calls, or by doing something that is Artsakh-centric on a regular basis. We were going to start our third so-called season, Karnig and I, by showing you how a group of youngsters from the diaspora have stayed connected with a group of youngsters in Artsakh. And we will bring that to you, hopefully in the weeks ahead, real soon, as a shining example of diaspora engagement with Artsakh at the ground level. And one might say, well, how's that going to change the dynamic? Well, I have a comment about how that's going to change the dynamic, and I'll get to it in a second.
Agreement which...
Let me just say this. Everybody agrees that we must demand more from the Armenian government in Yerevan. Yes, I've seen all the comments on front lines this evening. I see all the comments on social media. I hear everybody talking about the prime minister didn't do this right. He's useless. The national security advisor's remark about pulling Armenian troops from Artsakh is a foolish statement, in my opinion. All of that is true. But we must ourselves continue to demand more from the Armenian government in Yerevan, regardless of how capitulated we may think they are. But we have to start by demanding more from ourselves. We have to demand more from ourselves, because before we do that, we can't go demanding anything from anybody, even the government of Yerevan. So if you want to rise for our compatriots and for our nation, start by rising. Don't expect the foreigners, the Europeans, the Americans, the Russians, and the Iranians and the Chinese and whoever else to rise for us. So look, if you're in the United States of America, urge the US White House, urge the State Department, urge your senator, urge your member of House of Representatives to repel against this Azeri aggression, to walk back the Azeri economic and military aid that's flowing from US, with that resolution having been, Section 907 restrictions having been waived. If you're in Europe, write to the EU, write to your local representative in whatever country you're in, Sweden, France, Germany, I don't care. Write, get engaged. If you're in Russia, write to your representatives, regardless of what kind of a government, people may think Russia is. Speak up. Speak up. Canada, Australia, Middle East. We have representatives in these countries. I know we do. Reach out to them. They have a voice. Their voice is your voice. And let me get to the words of one great American writer now, John Steinbeck. Just set one day's work in front of last day's work. That's the way it comes out. Persistence, now that's not his words, it's my words. Persistence, relentless engagement, and tireless devotion. Folks, the sun has already risen in Artsakh, and the sun has already risen on Mount Ararat and in Yerevan already now. The sun will rise tomorrow in Chicago, where Karnig is, in Los Angeles, where I'm at, and everywhere else in the Northern Hemisphere. With it, may we all rise, and may we all rise fiercely once and for all, for Artsakh and Armenia and for the Armenian nation. Remember, just set one day's work in front of last day's work. Until next time on Frontlines, good day and good night to you all. Thank you, Arman.
Thank you, Arman.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.